Welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host, Nathan Battishall, and today I want to talk about some hacks or 5 key areas that can help progress your CDC approval or help speed up your CDC approval. Now, recently I did an episode on time, the value of time, and there are a lot of people in this industry who rush projects or they overlook things, and sometimes pulling back a bit or slowing things down is the new fast, because I see a lot of people where they rush over things and then it comes back to bite them. But there are some key things that can help you with your CDC application, because at the end of the day, the beauty of a CDC, it's a fast track approval, meaning no council, no bottleneck in that element, especially with smaller projects like dual locks, duplexes, terraces, some of those fast track approvals. You can save a lot of time and a lot of holding costs by progressing a project. So in my years of 20 odd years, and obviously since 2008 when the when CDC became a thing, I've been operating that space for a long time now. And over that long period of time, and over the years, I've developed some key things, especially since the low-rise diversity code came out for duplexes, dual locks, terraces. Developed some key things that I believe can help in terms of the efficiency of an application, in terms of executing an approval that can save some headaches or save some delays. Let's face it, there are sites and constraints on sites sometimes that you have no choice but to have some delays where you're in the hands of consultants or in the hands of different parties around things like easements or approval of easements, or where you're dealing with essential energy or moving power lines, or where you in some councils where you're dealing with certain elements. But I think if you can have a couple of little tools up your sleeve, if you can be made aware or well aware as an investor, developer, someone wanting to do developments and projects, it's key to always have a knowledge base, always have access to tools, access to some different things. And obviously, over my experience of thousands of DAs and applications and CDCs and executing thousands of projects for people over the years, like I've been able to obviously see where there's bottlenecks, see where you can look to improve bottlenecks, and I'm very big on constantly looking at ways to make things smoother, more efficient. For me, it's not all about speed. Sometimes it's more about ease and about efficiency and about doing things the right way around. And I'll walk through some of that over the course of this short episode today. But the first hack for me in terms of helping improve a CDC process is to deal with the different site constraints early in the CDC process, ideally early in the pre-design phase of a project. So I see a lot of times where people don't address things like, let's look at trees, for example. Although it's a CDC, yes, there is some advantages of CDC when it comes to trees, especially native trees. You can sometimes build a little bit closer. Some trees might have a very large tree protection zone. Sometimes under CDC, there are advantages of being able to build closer to trees and following the CEP legislation. So there are advantages there, but often people, for example, when it comes to driveways, like is there some structural root issues with the driveway crossover near that particular tree, or is there a tree you're looking to get removed? Is there a tree that you're hoping to get removed from council that may not affect or hinder your development, but may actually slow the process down during the approval and execution of that project? So having a look at the site constraints, so dealing with things like stormwater, dealing with that early on, ideally before you acquire the site, but especially before you go too far with your design. That's why it's key to look at how are you draining that site. Is it backward sloping? Does it allow absorption pit? If it's absorption pit in a particular area, if you can do it, like what size, where's the pit going to be located? How much room do you need? I've seen this where, and I've learned the hard way over the years through not doing it the right way around, where you won't leave enough room. Then you've got to do a redesign. So all of a sudden you're engaging stormwater after you've done a full design, the client's approved it, they're happy with it, they're good to go. And then all of a sudden you've got to redesign because you can't fit that pit or you can't fit that system in. So there's a whole lot of things. And then looking at like, are you at the appropriate height in terms of your sewer? Looking at things like that. Can that work? Is that going to be possible? And just looking at constraints, like for example, flood. Just because the site's flood affected doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do CDC. Often you can. But have you ordered a flood certificate? So we encourage all of our clients to order that flood certificate before you even start. Then we can get the flood engineer, we can get the engineer to look at it to determine firstly, can it be done CDC? And yes, if it can, what does that mean? What height do we need to design this product? Is there anything else that we need to factor in? Is there any areas that we're restricted to footprint in terms of building in, like those sort of elements? And that's key. Like constraints are so key. Like it's so important to look at the constraints early on. Like flood's a big one, because all of a sudden if you've designed that product based on a particular height, then you go and get the flood certificate later in the piece after the design's been approved. All of a sudden you lift it higher off the ground. All of a sudden that can run into problems because all of a sudden your private open space might be too high off the ground, or there could be issues with the driveway grades. There could be a whole range of different things that can really impact and hinder that project purely because you didn't order that documentation. So for me, I always say get that documentation before you start design. Get that feedback from the flood engineer before you've even started the design, so you go in with your eyes wide open. You can confidently execute a design that obviously looks good, meets the budget, but also when it goes back to the flood engineer, then you've worked within their constraints, you've worked within their feedback from day one, and it also makes their process a lot quicker because there's not too much backward and forward changing things by getting it right. That's where I think a lot of people get it wrong. They don't get that information early on, even if it means paying. You'll generally have to pay that engineer portion of the fee earlier to get that advice, but you're going to need to pay that later on anyway. So you might as well get it at the start. That way, you can go down that path. Bushfire is another one. We always get the bushfire information from the very start. Actually, if the client hasn't bought the site yet, get it before they've even bought the site, because it means then you got an idea of, okay, if the site's bushfire affected, what bow are we talking here? Well, we know straight away if it's more than bow 29, we can't do dual lock, we can't do terraces. Well, we can't do terraces CDC if it's bushfire altogether. But when it comes to dual lock, duplex, detached dual lock, if it's more than bow 29, well, straight away it's a no-go. I've seen this, unfortunately, where people have bought sites, or they've even gone to the point and they've engaged maybe inexperienced companies to design a duplex on a site and then get the bow, only to realise that there's 6, 7, 8 metres of their dwelling they have to cut off. And sadly, I've even seen it where the entire development can't be done as a dual lock. So all of a sudden the clients spent all that money executing a project that cannot be done or has to get severely reduced, which means more time, more money, wasted costs, frustration, stress, the whole range of it that could have been dealt with early in the piece of knowing what footprint you have to work with. So for me, that's really key, to discover the constraints. What are the constraints? What are the controls? If there's any of these elements involved, bushfire, flood, stormwater, arborists, so with trees, all of these different things, like even sewer's a big one too. If you're looking to encase, or if you want to avoid encasement, well, you need to get a sewer peg out. So ordering a sewer peg out earlier in the piece is key, because it means then you're going to need it anyway at some point. If you're going close to that sewer, generally you're going to need that sewer peg out anyway. And I'm amazed that people will, just to avoid paying $500-ish, $500, $600, $700 early in the piece, to avoid paying some money early in the piece. They then will people will get frustrated as to why they've then added 2 weeks, or there's 2 weeks added to their CDC approval time because the certifiers come back, or Sydney Water, if it's within that area, or the water provider for that particular council area has come back and said we need a sewer peg out, then we need engineering that goes with that. So by doing that early, you can save yourself a bit of time, a week or a couple of weeks. And then, if you're wanting to avoid the sewer and not in case, you know exactly where it is, the depths, you can ensure that you build away from that sewer, and you can execute that project in that manner. So for me, that's a big key one. That's the first thing, is to deal with the site constraints early in the design process. I say in the pre-design process, before you've even put pen to paper and started a design. So you've got a blank canvas, you know what you're dealing with, you put your overlays on, and then you design around those constraints, and you ensure you got the right people, the right consultants engaged, on board. You've got their advice, you've taken it on early in the piece, and then you're able to, when you do your first draft of your documentation, you can send it back to them to get their all clear, to get their okay, so that later in the process, you're not having to redo work, you're not having to go backwards, you're doing it the right way to go forwards. Another key one I find is to get a site classification early. If most sites, you'll be required to get a site classification so that you can really get your wind classification, your soil classo, all the information that your structural guys are going to need when they're doing the structural design. Often, again, to avoid paying $500, $600, $700, people will get this done later in the piece. But again, it can take a couple of weeks to get that soil classification, so get it early in the piece. We encourage people to get it right at the pre-design phase when you're getting survey and everything else, just so you know what sort of soil you're dealing with, so you've got all the information there, and that way it can be given straight to the structural guys when they're ready to do the structural engineering. So that's critical, and that's key. Sometimes if you may need other geotech too, like if there's areas where you need to prove that there's good site stability to show that there's no impact on the site stability that satisfies the certifier. It's very key to get that early in the piece. You want to get that before you even start design, because if it comes back highly affected, well, that straight away can cross out a CDC. So it's key to get those geotech elements early. As early in the piece as you can, or at least after you've done the site classification, at least once you've sort of done some concept drawings, because it means you're not waiting then. Sometimes what will happen, people won't order it until they're ready to go to the engineer, but then the engineer's got to wait a couple of weeks for the site classification, which then adds a few more weeks to your consultant period of time, and 2 weeks may not sound like much, but it can obviously prolong a project. So that's the second thing. Third thing is to deal with any council-related elements early in the piece. Now, first and foremost is Section 138. If you're doing terraces, or you're doing duplexes or dual locks where you need more than one crossover, maybe you can use the existing crossover, no issue there. But part of your CDC, you're going to need, for example, a Section 138. If you're wanting a second driveway crossover, if it's terraces, you might need multiple crossovers. So you need to get that Section 138. Now, a lot of people wait to do their design, then get the Section 138. Now, that can lead to problems, because your Section 138 determines where your garages go. Now, if council isn't happy with where you're proposing your Section 138, the Section 138 then dictates where your garages go. So it's very key to get that early in the piece. Like if we have concerns, in my experience, if I've had concerns on sites where you're really controlled by that Section 138, we'll get a Section 138 often before you even started design, because again, your Section 138 dictates and determines where you put your garages, where you put your driveways. It's key to look to get any council-related approvals in place. Obviously, a CDC means you don't have to submit your development to council for approval. but you still need things like a Section 138. In some councils, a Section 68 as well. But in a lot of cases, you need the Section 138, which is part of what the certifier is required to have if you're having, if you need driveway crossover approval. The certifier needs that to form part of the submission package for them to stamp and approve a CDC, whether it be a duplex or a dual lock, detached dual lock or terraces. They need that. So that's critical because, see, every council's different. Some councils take 1 week. Some councils take 2 weeks. A lot of them take anywhere from 3, 4, 5. We even know some that are taking 6 weeks to do Section 138s. Now, not only do you need the Section 138, but you'll need some documentation to accompany that. So often you'll need the traffic, like a traffic management plan. So that can take a week or so, sometimes 2 weeks. So by getting it early in the piece, it means then you've got the Section 138, you know where your driveways can go, and then it determines the design. I've unfortunately, again, probably a good half a dozen times a year, possibly more, projects come across my desk, unfortunately, where someone has gone ahead and prepared an entire full set of documentation, for example, for a duplex, only to have then council knock back the Section 138. So all of a sudden, someone spent a whole lot of money on architecturals, on structural, on stormwater, on thermal, landscape. They've paid certifiers fees, the whole deal, a whole package, to then realise that the entire, often the design needs to completely change in a lot of ways to determine the way of executing. Sometimes it can't even be done, which means then that the project's dead in the water. So it makes sense to look to get that 138 earlier in the piece so that you can deal with that situation. So that's the third thing. Fourth one, a way that you can really be efficient in your approvals for CDC is to engage consultants, all the rest of your consultants early in the design phase. I see a lot of people, they take a project all the way to full construction documentation. So, for example, you're working with your building designer, you're working with your architect or your planner, and they've worked with you then to take the project all the way through to the full CDC construction documentation. Now, that's all well and good, but one thing I found a key thing is the ability to engage consultants a little bit earlier in the process. For example, every design company works a little bit different. In my experience, I've always worked in 3 stages: concept design, design development, and then construction document, CDC or DA documentation. Now, provided you do enough documentation at your second stage, which is design development, where you've obviously you've developed your floor plans, your facades, your materials, you've checked all of your compliances, your calcs, your different calculations all line up, they all match up, everything's looking good, it's all looking good in that space. Then obviously the next phase then is to engage consultants. So for a CDC, every project's slightly different, but generally the main consultants you're going to need to engage is obviously structural engineering, stormwater engineering. You're going to need to engage landscape design, thermal for your nathers and your basics, and depending on where it is, sometimes you need other consultants. Sometimes you need acoustic if you're in an area that's deemed where there's noise. And sometimes there's other, obviously, finalising things like your arborist. If your arborist report, obviously you're getting early due diligence on things like arborist, flood, like I mentioned earlier. You want to get pre-design information and consultation on a lot of those things, but then you're going to need some documentation from a lot of those consultants to accompany your architecturals or to accompany your package that you're submitting to the certifier. So by engaging all of your consultants at that phase, once you've had that design development approved where the client's happy with it, often it will also go out to if you're not the builder, if you're just an investor or a developer who's looking to use a builder, I always say, look, have a builder that you're looking to work with as in a long-term relationship. That way the builder, designer, client relationship is strong. It's great. Then when you can bounce from project to project to project, that way it works terrific because you've got a builder that's helping price up from the beginning. They're helping in that pre-design phase as well in terms of giving it a bit of an idea of what where we need to sit in terms of size, if there's any tips or tricks that they're thinking we need to do to keep it on the right budget, what spec of product and that type of thing. So that can save a whole bunch of time by building a long-term relationship. Some of the clients I find that not so much just do the best in their projects, but do have a real peace of mind when they're doing their projects is because they've maintained and worked with a team for a long term. They're not bouncing from project to project to project, and in each project they're using a different builder, using a different planning firm. The clients who I find have got the best peace of mind. They're building that camaraderie. They've got people around them who want to go on the long game journey with them, and they're able to go from project to project to project because everyone in that party understands that how we need to make this work, and they're involved. The other parties, planners, builders are involved with that client even at an acquisition stage to make sure it stacks up and it works. So they're not overpaying for a site, or they're not, they're allowing the right numbers in their FISOs to make it stack up and to make it work. So I think that's key. And so by engaging consultants once the concept drawings are very well developed and they're at that place, it means then while all the different consultants are doing their piece, of which can take anywhere from a couple of weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes a month, depending on how busy the consultants are, it means then the construction drawings can be done. The first draft of the construction drawings are being done in sync with the consultant's documentation. Then when the consultant's documentation comes back, anything on the consultant's documentation can then be cross-checked against the architectural drawings and the plans and the construction documents, so that they can cross-check to make sure that everything's lining up, and they can overlay any structural, locating any posts or locations of beams, making sure that the joist directions and different things like that are well checked out and articulated. And again, the planner can be cross-checking and making sure that the landscape calcs all line up for CDC, for compliance, and there's that checking and cross-checking and making sure that everything is lined up and is suitable. So I think that's a key thing. And again, that can save some time rather than taking 2, 3, 4 weeks to do the construction docs and then sending it out to the consultants. You can save yourself 2, 3 weeks by doing it in that manner. And then the last thing, and I think it's a really key one, is engaging the certifier at the very start of the project. I see this often where a lot of people don't engage the certifier until they've got the whole package ready. Now, the problem is with that, what if there's something that was missed? Because you're always going to have human error. You're always going to have human error when it comes to a project. So you're relying on a planner, a designer, an architect to get it 100% right, which often they will. And I know in my experience, I try to pride myself on being someone who gets it right, my team getting it right more often than not. But for me, one of the things I've always found is critical and key. And look, not every client wants to do it. Not every investor or developer wants to do it. But I've just found the ones that don't often sometimes learn the hard way. And again, it can take more time then, because if you engage your certifier from the very start, I encourage people to engage a certifier from day one, because it means then that you can submit drawings to that certifier to do the initial assessments early in the piece, early in the process. And that's where I found it brings a lot of peace of mind, because it's a lot easier. And again, I've seen this where people have waited right till when they've got the whole package ready and then engaged a certifier. And then the certifier picks up some really critical and key things that completely change the design, whether it be an average setback or whether it be they've forgotten about the rear setback, or maybe the block was bigger than 900 square metres, so you need a 5 metre rear setback instead of a 3 on ground floor, and then a 12 metre setback instead of an 8. Just a simple overlooked error where someone may have just human error, they've missed it. But by engaging a certifier earlier in the piece, then you can pick that up just at a conceptual level drawing stage, and then it just means then that the certifier is able to give you a checklist. That's the beauty of it. The certifier can then do a checklist of these are the things that comply, these are the things that don't. And the beauty is if you do it at that conceptual stage, it then means that you're only changing concept drawings if you need to make some tweaks or some compliance changes to the concept drawings. Whereas I've seen it, unfortunately, where people have gone the whole package. So all of a sudden, they've got to make significant changes to the full architectural set, which all of a sudden, what could have been a couple of hour process to change designs could lead to a whole day of lost time, lost income, and then not only that, then all of the consultants' documentation needs to be changed, structural, stormwater, landscape, thermal, all of those things then need to be changed, and all of a sudden that can lead to 1 week, 2 week, 3 week delays, can lead to bottlenecks, it can lead to obviously frustration, it can lead to time, purely because someone didn't want to execute a certifier in the process. So there's 5 hacks, 5 areas to help make your CDC approvals more efficient, but also to help make your CDC process a little bit smoother, less stress-free for everyone involved, both being yourself as the investor and developer, but also the team that you've got around you executing the project, so that you can go in with your eyes wide open and avoid some of the mistakes that I've mentioned today. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Please, if you haven't done so already, make sure you like and subscribe to this episode. Also, if you don't mind, if you've been listening in and you're enjoying these episodes, we would love if you could give us a rating, whether you're listening on Apple or Spotify. I'd encourage you, please go in and give us a 5-star review if you're enjoying this content. And again, if you've got any feedback or any questions or any topics or any episodes that you'd like us to discuss, or any guests that you'd love us to bring onto this podcast, we're always open to fresh, new ideas. We've got some exciting things happening on this podcast over the rest of this year. We're going to unveil some exciting things. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to tune in next week.